This volume changes everything. Let's get it. Our story starts in Class C and the atmosphere is heavy because today Ruin would settle the score. Classes are done, the school is quiet, it's the perfect time to act. So far, X gave Ruin the slip. Dragon Boy narrowed his candidates down to 10. His prime candidate being Hirata as we discussed in part 1. However, Ruin needed certainty and to get that he needed Kei. Ruin knew Kei was X's pawn. He would use her to pressure X. Honestly, Ruin would rather not involve Kei because it makes things messy, but X left him no choice. From the second Ruin learned of X's existence, he's been planning. He sent spies to keep tabs on key targets within Class D. Everyone thought he was doing this to find X, but they were wrong. Ruin had his goons follow people to put pressure on X. Like I've mentioned before, Ruin loves to get into your head. That's why Ruin invaded Class D in part 1. Ruin wanted everyone, including X, to know that he was watching. That at any second X's secret could be found out. Ruin likes to poke at your biggest fear and twist it until you surrender. Ruin assumed X used Horikita as a puppet to avoid being found, and X went to great lengths to do so, so it must be important, which means surveillance is effective in pressuring X. Ruin planned to mercilessly hound X, make him live under constant paranoia. That's why he sent X that picture of Kei in volume 6. He was straight up telling X that he would target Kei, but didn't tell him when or how. The feeling of not knowing must be killing X. But what's the point of pressure without profit? And today, Ruin would reap his rewards. This morning, Ruin sent X a text. It was marked as read, so he knew he saw it. Ruin informed X that today he would strike. Ruin pressured X, waited until X was at his weakest, and then engineered the final showdown. In Volume 5, Horikita compares Ruin's plans to a spider, slowly weaving its web to trap prey. But in this case, Ruin is like a snake, slowly coiling around its victim, suffocating and weakening them until it's the perfect time to strike. Ruin's never felt this excited in his life. Ibuki asks Ruin what's the point of finding X. Even if they know who he is, it doesn't stop him from helping Class D. Ruin agreed if Ruin's goal was to reach Class A, then this is not that important. But X held a different meaning for Dragon Boy. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Ruin to find someone similar to himself. He's never experienced that, and he'll do anything to make it happen. While Ruin was scheming, Hiyori approached him. She picked up on the intense aura. She asked Ruin what was going on. Ruin informed her that he'd meet X today and asked if she wanted to join. Girl straight up denied the invitation, saying she'd be in the library if he needs her. While all of Class C feared Ruin, Hiyori was not fazed, and she hated conflict, so she declined Ruin's offer. The clock slowly ticked away second by second until it was showtime. What Ruin would do next is risky, so he only brought along those he could trust: Ishizaki, Ibuki, and Albert. Ibuki was impatient, and it's understandable. Ruin intentionally didn't tell anyone what he had planned today. Spies ruined his plan last time, but not this time. However, Ibuki was ultra annoying, so he gave her something. He informed Ibuki that he called Kei to the rooftop by sending her a text demanding she show up. And Ruin made sure Kei knew it was him. Funny thing to note, Ibuki literally remembers Kei as that noisy woman from Class D. Ibuki also pointed out the obvious: why the hell would Kei show up? Especially if Ruin's inviting her. Ruin explained he had leverage. He found out about Kei's past from Manabe and her friends, and he got to thinking, piecing together all the clues he had so far, coming to the conclusion that Kei did not want her past leaked, and that X promised to protect Kei if she went along with his plans. So using the knowledge of Kei's past, Ruin threatened Kei: show up to the rooftop or I'll expose your past. Ruin also revealed that he texted X, letting X know that he invited Kei to the rooftop and would extract his identity from her using whatever means necessary. Ruin figured this threat was effective, because if Kei was only a pawn, there's a chance X will abandon her. But if Kei breaks, there's a chance for X to be found out, giving X an incentive to show up. But Ibuki was still paranoid. What if Kei reports them to the school? Ruin assured her she wouldn't. As long as Ruin held Kei's secret, they have nothing to worry about. In Ruin's mind, the situation he set up was flawless. If Kei shows up, Ruin extracts X's identity. Or if X shows, even better. But Ibuki raised another concern. What if Ruin can't get Kei to spill the beans? No worries, Ruin was prepared, and the info Manabe gave him was crucial. Ruin understood that victims of intense trauma can often lose their grip on reality if placed in an environment that reawakens those memories. Ruin's plan was to put Kei in a situation where her trauma resurfaces by replicating the bullying that happened to her in her past. He would weaken her resolve and then extract X's identity. Ibuki rightfully was like, that's crazy. Even Ishizaki voiced his concern, but Ruin was worry-free because he had measures in place. The four of them climbed the quiet staircase all the way to the rooftop. Ruin warned them, if they wanted to turn back, now was it. Ishizaki and Albert were on board, but Ibuki was iffy, but ultimately decided to stay. However, if it gets bad, she'll leave. Ruin already studied the rooftop. He knew there was only one camera. Ruin sprayed over the camera so no one could watch. Ruin ordered Albert to stay by the door and only let Kei pass. Now all there was to do was wait. The clock struck 2 and a solitary girl walked through the doors. It was Kei. Ruin was enjoying himself, but Ishizaki and Ibuki were nervous. Kei asked what was the big idea, referring to the text Ruin sent. Ruin knew Kei was playing dumb. Kei should be well aware of everything Ruin sent her. Ruin asked Kei if she told anyone about this meeting, but it was a trick question. Of course she didn't. She couldn't afford to. The only person she could tell is X, and that did not matter because Ruin already told X what's going down. Ruin had a tiny sliver of hope that X would show up with Kei, but that didn't happen. Kei acted super annoyed. It was cold and she came in light clothing. She wanted to leave. Ruin asked her why even bother coming then. She could have ignored him. Kei made up an excuse saying she didn't want him to spread fake news. Kei might be good at deceiving Class D, but Ruin is out of her league. He saw right through her and called her out, proudly declaring everyone here knows she was bullied in the past. Kei did not say a word, but as we learned from our friend Ayanokoji, at times not giving an answer is an answer. Kei didn't say anything, but her body language told Ruin everything. Ruin, however, did cut Kei some slack, saying how unfortunate that Manabe and her friends found her secret. Kei demanded Ruin tell her what he wanted, but Ruin taunted her, saying what if he's just here to kill time. Kei warned them if they do anything to her, she'll report them to the school. Another bluff, and Ruin called her out. If she could do that, she wouldn't come here alone. But Ibuki was cautious, maybe she's recording them. But Ruin knew Kei didn't have that option. She couldn't afford to have the contents of this conversation leaked. No one can know she was bullied. However, there was something Kei could do, and Ibuki almost carelessly revealed it, but Ruin stopped her. One of the terms of Ayanokoji blackmailing Manabe and her friends was that they couldn't reveal Kei's past to anyone. Obviously, they broke this promise by telling Ruin. Dragon Boy knew this. Ruin's whole plan relied on knowing Kei's past. It was a double-edged sword. If he doesn't reveal Kei's past, he can use it as leverage against X and Kei. But the second he reveals it to anyone, that leverage is gone. Ruin had to play this right. He had one shot. And the key to making this all work is to figure out how deep the bond is between X and Kei. Ruin cut right to it, asking Kei who she's working for. Kei told him she has no idea what he's talking about. And while Kei's mouth was saying one thing, her mannerisms were screaming a different story. Kei seemed annoyed, impatient. Ruin figured that Kei's plan from the beginning was to deny everything. So Ruin did what he does best. He used the information he had to get a reaction. He revealed everything about how X was protecting Kei behind the scenes, how X used evidence to blackmail Manabe and her friends. Again, Kei didn't say a word, but from her glare, Ruin figured she knew all that. Ruin even told Kei how X forced Manabe and her friends to betray Class C. Again, Kei denied knowing anything, but this time was different. Ruin could tell she was genuine. This could be a problem. Ruin had no idea how much X revealed to Kei. There's a possibility she doesn't even know who X is. Maybe he's ordering her around from the shadows using an anonymous email. But Ruin quickly banished that thought. If Kei really didn't know, why didn't she just accept X existed and admit she doesn't know who he is? Why deny everything? There has to be more here. Ruin urged Kei again, just tell him who X is. Ruin has no interest in Kei and will let her go. But like every time, Kei just denied knowing anything. Ruin knew he had to push, so he threatened her again, saying he'll reveal her past. Kei just stood there in silence. Ruin knew she was in a tough spot. If she helps him, she betrays X and makes an enemy out of him. But if she keeps quiet, Ruin reveals her past. Dragon Boy simplified her choice, boldly claiming her only option is to give him what he wants. All she has to do is give him a name and she's free to go. However, Kei thought of a different angle. She brought up a good point. Even if she gives them a name, how do they know it's right? Ishizaki, like a total idiot, agreed with her and Ruin told him to stay quiet. Dragon Boy already had a rebuttal. If Kei's caught lying, Ruin would simply reveal her past later. As long as he had this weapon, Kei was at his mercy. Note, this is the same leverage Ayanokoji had on Kei at the end of Volume 4. However, Kei came prepared. She asserted whether or not she gave Ruin the right name, it didn't matter. Ruin could blackmail her either way. There's no guarantee. Ruin could use Kei like X used Manabe and her friends. She won't give him a name. She won't confirm she's working with anyone, but she won't deny it either. Simply, she'll say nothing. It's in her best interest to do so. Ruin now understood Kei's plan. She thought long and hard and came to this answer. It was a good option, but not a great one. But still, there's an elephant in the room. If she says nothing, he'll reveal her past. Kei, however, caught on to Ruin's plan and the downside of his double-edged sword. Ruin already looked for X and was unsuccessful. If they reveal her past, they throw away the only chance they have at finding X. Ruin denied it. If Kei doesn't answer him, it'll only delay his search, not stop it. He can just look for X later. However, Kei countered, saying this might be his only chance to look for X. If X knows Ruin is after him, he's gonna lay low. Kei was better than Ruin expected, smart and confident. Ruin speculated that X saved Kei because he noticed her talents and status. She was an excellent tool, but that also means there's a chance X is okay with abandoning Kei. Because if X values keeping his identity hidden over advancing to Class A, saving Kei might not be a priority, and the only chance Ruin had at meeting X might be gone. Ruin complimented Kei. She came prepared. Kei shot back, saying, "See, you should just let me go." It was time. If X showed, it would be by now. Dragon Boy checked his phone, but no response from X. Guess this wouldn't be easy. Ruin declared his only choice was to drag the information out of Kei. He readied himself. There's no going back. In his head, Ruin blamed X. It's his fault for pushing him this far. To corner an opponent like X, Ruin knew he had to take risks. Kei was curious. Their threats failed, so what else could they do? Ruin pointed out the obvious. Torture. Ruin commanded Ibuki to hold Kei in place, but Ibuki resisted, saying this is too much. Ruin reminded Ibuki that so far she's been nothing but a disappointment. She failed time and time again, referring back to the events of Volume 3 and 5. This is her chance to make up for it. If Ibuki was afraid of the consequences, Ruin assured her he'd take full responsibility for whatever happens here. Ibuki clicked her tongue and within seconds she was behind Kei, holding her in place. Kei screamed and thrashed about, but it was no use. Ibuki was a seasoned martial artist. Ruin commanded Ishizaki to go grab buckets of water. Ishizaki's like, why? But Ruin told him to shut up and just do it. While Ishizaki was gone, Ruin proposed a little chat with Kei. Kei pleaded for them to let her go, but it wasn't happening. There's a method to Ruin's madness. There's a reason Ruin didn't have the buckets prepared ahead of time. By having Kei held down while they waited, it built anticipation. Kei was held against her will, wondering what would happen next. The anxiety and fear inside her intensified. The same feelings Ayanokoji nurtured when he mercilessly cut her off. Ruin would amplify those feelings to get what he wanted. But hopeless or not, Kei resisted. She repeated herself. If they lay a finger on her, she'll report them to the school. Ruin knew she wouldn't and let her in on more of his speculation. He figured X promised to protect Kei in case of emergency. Otherwise, none of this made sense. Kei's fiery personality would draw attention from a lot of girls, not just Manabe and her friends. It was strange Kei lived carefree, with no worry of her secret being revealed. Why? Where did she get that sense of security? It must be X. Ibuki questioned Ruin's speculation, but he just kept going. X made contact with Kei when she collided with Manabe. But what about before? Ruin asked if Kei made Hirata her boyfriend in order to protect herself. Ruin was right on the money and Kei's eyes widened. Ruin now understood Kei's parasitic nature. Kei tried to deny it all, but her response was weak. Ruin looked into her eyes and noticed the darkness lurking within. The same darkness X must have noticed. Kei finally showed him her cute side. Ibuki asked Ruin how he figured all that out. Ruin explained from experience he's dealt with rotten people. Ishizaki finally arrived with the buckets. Ruin had complete lay of the land. He knew where everything was. And that's not a coincidence. From the second Ruin set foot on the school, he got got to work, testing the rules and figuring out how to beat them. He asked his goons an interesting question. If the school recycles exams, couldn't you just beat them by asking the seniors? It made sense, but when you ask the seniors, you don't get anything useful. It could be that they change up the rules each year, but that's not all. Ruin speculated each year had different rules. If you could get an edge just by asking the seniors, it wouldn't be much of an exam. So it made sense to have a rule stopping the seniors from leaking information. Naturally, by using the threat of expulsion. Ruin tested this theory by contacting a few second years. Now this puts what Ayanokoji did back in volume 1 in context. Remember Ayanokoji asked an older student for exam questions? Ayanokoji was also testing things out. And just like Ayanokoji, Ruin also pushed the limits. Making a backroom deal with Katsuragi, damaging security cameras, bribing seniors. Ruin wanted to know what he could do and what he couldn't do. And what he was about to do to Kei was the riskiest experiment yet. Ruin explained trauma is better evoked through experience rather than words. Ruin signaled Ishizaki and Ibuki pushed Kei forward, and Ishizaki mercilessly showered her with a bucket of freezing cold water. Kei immediately fell to the ground trembling. She hugged herself with both arms, trying to escape her fate, but the chill penetrated the very core of her being. Her ferocity was no more. She shrank back, a shell of her former self. Ruin yelled out, asking her if she remembered the baptism she received at her old school. Kei yelled out no. She covered her ears like a little girl afraid of ghosts. This was just the beginning. Ruin would thoroughly break her. Dragon Boy took out his phone and started recording. He forcefully grabbed Kei by her bangs and lifted her up. He threatened to spread this video throughout the school. Now that's not actually true because that would get him and his goons expelled, but right now Kei was vulnerable, so she'd believe anything Ruin would say. Ruin egged her on, cry, scream, beg for mercy, and Kei shouted no over and over again. Ibuki had enough. She turned a blind eye to the atrocity happening right in front of her. Ruin admitted bullying the weak was fun. He had a taste for it. Ruin remembered a time when he was attacked, but once he beat back one of his arrogant attackers, the dude cried like a baby. However, Ruin confessed Kei was different. Despite her past, she stood tall in Class D, not an easy task. In a way, she might be suited to surviving Ruin's torture. But Ruin understood once someone's bullied into submission, those scars run deep. The intense feelings are easy to tap into. Ruin crouched down, meeting Kei at her level. He etched an idea into her mind. You can't change human nature. Kei was destined to be bullied. She'd do best to remember that. Ruin ordered Ishizaki to grab more water as he picked up the final bucket and doused it over Kei's head. Kei let out a silent scream and curled up like a ball. Ruin started bombarding her with questions. Who's protecting you? Kei squealed no one while shaking her head and trembling. At this point in the story, we switch to Kei's POV. She felt the chill down to the very fiber of her being. Why was she being bullied? What did she do wrong? Why was she still alive? Kei blamed herself, and the coldness in her heart spread through her entire body. The scars etched into Kei's soul from her years of bullying started to ache. Her parasitic persona took hold, urging her to save herself, to end the suffering, and Ruin fed into it. He urged her to protect herself. There's no reason to suffer like this. However, the logical part of Kei's mind wasn't dead yet. Kei knew if she gave Ruin what he wanted, it would not end there. Ruin might blackmail her into selling out Class D. The road of betrayal is paved with nothing but misery. Kei was determined to hold on to the last shred of hope. The hope that Ayanokoji would come save her. However, Ruin caught wind of that hope and would crush it. He knew what she was thinking, that if she betrays X, she'll lose X's protection. Ruin's words echoed through Kei's mind while the chill penetrated her body. It was so bad, Kei's teeth started chattering. She clawed at the ground in order to stop it, but her body had long stopped listening to her. Ruin's tactics were working. Kei's mind struggled to tell the difference between the past and the present. Her reawakened trauma served as a time machine, flooding her mind with painful memories. The memories she tried so hard to lock away. And Ruin egged her on, saying how stupid she is for clinging on to hope. X isn't coming to save her, and it can all be over if she gives him a name. Otherwise, things would go back to how they were, back to middle school. Kei's version of a living hell. Throughout this torture, only one thought ran through Kei's mind. Save me, I'm scared. Ruin asked her if she was really naive enough to live in this fantasy world where her happy school life would last. He Kei vowed to air out all her dirty laundry. Her position within Class D will vanish. Ruin's words were meant to eat away at the last bit of Kei's sanity. Kei's mind played tragic images of her past, scenes where she was viciously bullied. Kei put her hands around her ears, screaming out, "No, no, no!" She did not want to go back to that miserable world, a world that made her not want to exist. Ruin played the same old tune, ended, protect yourself. Kei, with her eyes shut, begged for forgiveness, but it fell on deaf ears. Ruin shattered Kei's pride, which wasn't hard to do. It had been broken before, she just clumsily taped it back together. A shade of pure whiteness enveloped her mind, but soon the white turned into darkness. The last bit of resistance Kei put up against her trauma shattered into bits. Kei thought to herself how stupid she was. Back in middle school, she was as fierce and competitive as she is now. This naturally led to her making enemies. The bullying started off light. They would scribble on her textbook and steal her notes. But then it escalated. They would pour water on her when she used the toilet. They would beat her up and spread the video throughout class so everyone could laugh at her. They put thumbtacks in her shoes, dead animals in her desk, even pulled down her skirt in front of the entire class. They would hide her uniform and underwear after swim class, make her confess to boys she didn't like. And as it got worse and worse, they'd make her eat things off the ground and lick their shoes. Every day, Kei endured humiliation after humiliation. Under Ruin's torture, she relived those dark days. But nothing changed. Just like then, she's suffering the same fate under the hands of Ruin and his goons. Kei wondered if she would go back to the old days. If all her friends would betray her, she couldn't take that. Kei looked up at the sky as tears welled up in her eyes. Why did she have to go through this? She didn't want to. Her mind began to wander. She thought back to what Ruin said. All they want is X. If she gave them Ayanokoji's name, it would all be over. She'll be free. There's no guarantee Ruin wouldn't betray her. She might lose all her friends. She'll definitely lose Ayanokoji's trust. But what's happening right now will end. Her suffering will vanish. She can't help it, can she? Ayanokoji said he'd save her, but he didn't even show. Even if she waits, nothing will change. She even messaged Ayanokoji and made eye contact. Did he not get it? Kei wondered if she's fooling herself. She didn't know. Her relationship with Ayanokoji was shallow. He selfishly cut her off with no guarantees. It's like she wasn't important at all. Kei wondered if she was betrayed, if he abandoned her. And Ruin confirmed that fact, saying, "Guess no one's showing up." Ruin told Kei confidently that X deceived her. Kei weakly tried to refute it, but Ruin laid out facts. Ruin told Kei that X was the one who set up the bullying event with Manabe. Kei instinctively denied it, even pinning the blame on Hirata. But soon it all made sense. It was no mere coincidence Manabe and her friends were there. Ruin enlightened Kei on how X pretended to be someone who hated Kei in order to get Manabe and her friends to show up. Even though it logically made sense, Kei did not want to admit it. But the evidence was all there, she couldn't deny it. So Ayanokoji didn't save her, and he was betraying her this entire time. Ruin asked Kei, "Do you see X anywhere?" Ruin explained X cut ties with her as soon as it got risky. Kei repeated over and over again in her head, "That can't be. She's helped him so many times, but when she needed him the most, he's nowhere to be found." She fell for his trap. Ruin put into words the realization Kei just had. From the beginning, Ayanokoji was bullying her just like she was bullied in the past. The darkness that surrounded Kei intensified. She realized there was no way to escape this vicious cycle. Back in part 1, Ayanokoji mentioned fear and anxiety, the two feelings that would cause Kei to break. But Ruin added something else to the formula that acted as a catalyst: betrayal. Ruin extended Kei the same lifeline. Give him a name and it'll all be over. She'll be saved. Ruin promised to leave her alone if she complied. The promise echoed through Kei's mind. All she had to say was Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, and she'll taste salvation. She wasn't sure if Ruin would trust her, but she knew if she gave him Ayanokoji's name right now, he'll believe her. Kei's body moved without her permission. Her lips trembled. She let out a faint ta. Progressively, Kei pushed out more words. Taka. Ruin listened intently as his face grew closer and closer. However, Kei regained control and declared proudly, she will never ever tell him. From the beginning, she had no intention to. The smile on Ruin's face vanished. A ray of light pierced through the sky. Even if starting tomorrow Kei lost her place at the school, it didn't matter. She would never give Ruin what he wanted. And it's not because of Ayanokoji. Kei no longer put faith in Ruin's promises or Ayanokoji's existence. A warm light enveloped her. Ruin asked if this was her final answer, even though X betrayed her. Yes, Kei said this was fine. Even if she regrets it, this is her decision. Even she wanted to act cool till the very end. Her vision cleared up and for the first time she could see everything. Ruin was like, what a shame. He did not want to take drastic measures, but Kei left him no choice. He did confess she had his respect. Even given her tragic past, she did not betray. Kei repeated the same words over and over again in her mind. This is fine. She might break here, but that's okay. She felt proud of herself. Even though she was betrayed, she did not betray. She ended the vicious cycle. And hey, as a bonus, maybe her sacrifice will bring Ayanokoji some peace. From the beginning, Kei's life at the school wasn't interesting. It was happy, but nothing exciting. When she worked with Ayanokoji, all that changed. It was fun. It was a thrill. She felt like best girl helping the protagonist from the shadows. Kei admired the person she had grown to be. She had no regrets. But if she's honest, deep down, she still hoped Ayanokoji would come save her. It was a pointless wish, but it did exist. She thought herself a fool for believing his words. Guess that's the price she had to pay. First she had Hirata protect her and then Ayanokoji. Her constant reliance on others made this situation inevitable. But that stops today. Underneath this cold, dark sky, she resolved herself. She felt a comfort she had never felt before. Kei bid farewell to her fake persona and welcomed back her true self. Alright, so this is massive for Kei's character and I'm gonna break it down because it often gets overlooked. Kei's story is that of a character who gave up her self-worth in order to protect herself. You can see this in her monologue back in volume 4. Kei is willing to give up everything. Her youth, her friends, all of it, in order to keep herself safe. This is the result of her bullies back in middle school shattering her self-worth. That's why she acts all bossy and surrounds herself with mean girls, so they don't target and reawaken her trauma. That's also why she's willing to go as far as giving up her body to Ayanokoji in order to protect her past. But this whole scene with Ruin left Kei in a bit of a dilemma. She could give up Ayanokoji's name. However, there's no guarantee Ruin would stop just there. So effectively, Kei would switch her parasitic destination from Ayanokoji to Ruin. But by keeping her mouth shut, she rejected that fate. She no longer wanted to be a parasite because it was lame and degrading. That's what she means when she says she wants to act cool till the very end. But why did she make that sudden shift? The Kei of the past would have easily latched on to Ruin. Well, she just told us. Because helping Ayanokoji with his plans gave her a renewed sense of self-worth. She felt awesome, she was helpful, she made a difference. She did not want to go back to being just a pathetic parasite. So she actively made the decision not to degrade herself. That's what she means when she says it's fine, everything is fine. She's done everything in her power not to degrade herself. And she's conquered her lack of self-worth. She's no longer just a parasite. She's grown to be someone she can admire. Now this is some gangster character development. Okay, so that's Kei's POV, but what was Ayanokoji up to? To see that, we'll have to turn the clock back all the way to when class ended for the day. Ayanokoji packed up his stuff and noticed Kei locked eyes with him. This was the signal Kei mentioned earlier. Ayanokoji even read the message Kei sent. Kei said it was some trouble with Manabe, but Ayanokoji knew it was Ruin. Because remember, Ruin notified Ayanokoji. Kei realized Ayanokoji noticed her eye contact and left looking satisfied. Well, that was a mistake. Yukimura asked Ayanokoji if he wanted to hang out, and our boy's like, yup, I got nothing planned. Damn! Before leaving, Sato approached our boy. Girl's persistent, she asked Ayanokoji out again. Ayanokoji, however, turned her down. But our dude did feel guilty. So, he offered to take her out during winter break. Sato was overjoyed, pushing her assets against our boy. As Sato happily left, Ayanokoji noticed a strange look from Shinohara and her friends. Ayanokoji entered the hallway to meet up with his crew. Haruka had a creepy grin on her face, and Sakura looked devastated. Not hard to imagine what's up. Ayanokoji cut Haruka off before she could start, saying there's nothing happening here. Haruka's like, oh, I didn't say anything. Ayanokoji's like, yeah, but you're going to. Haruka pointed out seeing him and Sato together, it was kinda obvious. Ayanokoji remained firm, nothing was up. Leaving the topic, the gang walked around. Miyaki noticed no one followed them. Makes sense because Ruin's plan is already in motion. Haruka brought up the topic of wanting to leave the school grounds. Keiaki Mall is nice and all, but she wanted a taste of the outside. Sakura, on the other hand, didn't mind the school. They brought up the topic of families, and seems like Haruka's family life is complicated. Man, Classroom of the Elite and dysfunctional families. Name a more iconic duo. But mid-conversation, Ayanokoji just stopped. He made up an excuse saying he pulled an all-nighter and wanted to go home. Note, it wasn't 2 p.m. yet, so Kei and Ruin did not make contact. Ayanokoji took out his phone and called a girl with a dazzling ponytail, Sai. But Sai immediately shot back saying, "Weren't you done with me?" Guess she's still salty. Ayanokoji's like, "Yeah, but it's important." Despite Sai's verbal beatdown, she took the meeting. They met up in a deserted classroom as Sai looked out the window. She watched the snow fall and Ayanokoji asked her if she liked snow. Sai said when she was younger, yes, but as she got older, she started to hate it. This will be important in a second. Sai asked Ayanokoji what he wanted. Ayanokoji turned it around asking why she's so fixated on Class A, enough to use him. Even for a teacher, Ayanokoji knew this was extreme. Sai said it was healthy competition between teachers, but our boy knew that was BS. He called her out. If that's really the case, she wouldn't have screwed over her class in the beginning. To clarify, back in Volume 1, Class D had their exam questions changed, but Sai didn't inform them, messing up Horikita's plan. Sai, caught in her lies, refused to elaborate. Ayanokoji asked if she's still deciding whether or not this batch of Class D is worth it. Sai stopped responding, said this was stupid and wanted to leave. Let's now dive into that whole conversation about snow. It'll explain the point of this conversation for Ayanokoji, because Ayanokoji needs to know if Sai is still serious about climbing to Class A. Again, diving into the meaning of snow in Japanese literature, it represents idealism and innocence. The type of idealism that drives you to take heroic action. And man, does that fit beautifully here. If you remember the scene back in Volume 4 where the three teachers are drinking, you'll notice a sense of rivalry being implied between the teachers. But not recent rivalry, something about the past, something that happened 10 years ago. We can assume they were all students here at some point. So if you sub out the meaning of snow with idealism, Sai's indirectly saying when she was younger she was hopeful, idealistic. But as the years went by, that hope was crushed. Sai got terrible batch after terrible batch of students. At one point she stopped caring. That's how she got to be where she is now. Ayanokoji wanted to know if she still had that sense of idealism, because if she did, he can use her. Ayanokoji warned Sai, if she doesn't answer him, she can give up on ever using him. And there it was, the carrot on the stick. But Sai did not readily bite, asking, "Didn't you give up associating with me?" Ayanokoji informed Sai that today was important. If she doesn't act, Class D is finished. Sai asked for details. Ayanokoji explained at 2 p.m. Kei will meet Ruin. Sai was surprised. Kei? Ruin? Ayanokoji told Sai about Kei's past bullying. She wasn't aware. Ayanokoji speculated if Ruin leaks Kei's past, she'll shut down at best or drop out at worst. The look on Sai's face told Ayanokoji how bad the consequences were for dropping out. Ayanokoji told Sai if she acts now, she could at least damage Class C. But both sides will be hit hard. Sai understood why Ayanokoji's talking to her. This is hard for him to deal with alone. But if a teacher is involved, Ayanokoji might even be able to keep his identity hidden. Ayanokoji asked if she would cooperate. Sai didn't jump right in, explaining that the school doesn't like teachers meddling in student affairs. Her jumping in and saving Kei was unrealistic. Ayanokoji knew she'd declined but wanted to see how far he could push. He offered her a deal. If she does this, he'll promise not to sabotage Class D in the future. But Sai still did not agree as expected. Also, it's easier to ask for something small after asking for something big. Ayanokoji revealed he never intended for her to step in. That was never in his calculations. All he needed was for Sai to be a witness. So he invited her to come watch how the story ends. They approached the stair but stayed out of Albert's view. It's been half an hour since Kei made contact. Noticing Ishizaki and the drops of water on the floor, Ayanokoji understood Ruin's plan. But since it's still going on means Kei did not break. Ayanokoji miscalculated, but it was a positive change. Sai wondered why Ayanokoji didn't just go in. But our boy was patient. The later he goes in, the better. Being too late had its risks, but in this case, the risks were worth it. With time to kill, Ayanokoji asked Sai a question. He brought up the situation at the end of Volume 1, where they saved Sudo by buying one mark for 100,000 private points. Ayanokoji highlighted Sai's words. There's nothing in this school you can't buy with points. Sai confirmed it. But that didn't make sense to our boy. If that was the case, no one would get expelled. You can just bail everyone out. Sai countered saying it's not that easy. For starters, other Class Ds in the past didn't have this many points. And also, why would your classmates risk so much to save you? Ayanokoji agreed, but it still broke the system. Having a way out significantly reduces the risk in every exam. Sai agreed, but could not meet Ayanokoji's eyes. That means there was more here. Ayanokoji asked another question. When he bought that one mark, Sai quoted him 100,000 private points. Did Sai decide that number, or is there a basis? Because a teacher deciding that number is wild. Sai asked what Ayanokoji was implying. Ayanokoji speculated the existence of detailed rules for every private point transaction. Maybe there's a manual where all of it's written down. Sai repeated back the question to him. You're asking if the price I gave you was determined by the school. Ayanokoji's like, yep, please answer the question. question. But Sai didn't. She just stood there in silence and finally fired back saying she can't tell him everything. Fascinating, she had no trouble answering the other questions. Why is this one so special? Ayanokoji took it to mean she can't answer. Our boy kept going. The school likely has rules for each situation when it comes to buying test scores. Maybe you can trade 100k private points for one test mark on every exam. Ayanokoji asked Sai if that was it. Sai tried to change the topics, but Ayanokoji wouldn't let her. Maybe that trade's available only for a limited time after you enroll, kinda like a flash sale. Or maybe it's a one-time offer. Sai repeated back she can't answer those questions. And even if she does, how would Ayanokoji know she's truthful? Ayanokoji's like, simple, I'll just ask you. He looked into her eyes and asked her here and now, how much is it to buy 1 mark on the next test? It was so quiet you could hear a pin fall on the floor. Sai did not answer. Ayanokoji threatened her, saying she's obligated to answer. If she doesn't, he'll ask another teacher. And if that teacher answers, he'll turn Sai in for discrimination. But Ayanokoji was well aware the other teacher might not answer either, which opened up a whole world of possibilities. Maybe the deal is indeed a one-time thing. Or maybe it's only available when a student receives a failing grade. Sai asked Ayanokoji if he's testing the rules. Ayanokoji's like, yup, all the main players are. Ichinose is experimenting by hoarding points. Ruin's making backroom deals with Class A. Also, this goes to show you how far behind Horikita is. This is why Ayanokoji keeps saying she's not ready. Sai realized she couldn't get out of this, so she caved. Ayanokoji's 100% on the money. The key to victory are the rules around private points. Many students in the past tested them, even the defects from Class D. There were rules for everything. Violence, expulsion, test scores, everything has a price tag. But there is a limit to what teachers can say, and even the teachers don't know everything. Sai answered Ayanokoji. She can't tell him whether or not he can buy 1 mark on the next test, which was enough for him so that 1 mark did have a price tag. So when the time comes, he can set up appropriate countermeasures. Sai asked if this had anything to do with Kei. Our boy's like, nah, he's just killing time. But honestly, finding out these rules was just a bonus. The real reason Ayanokoji asked Sai all these questions is to find out one thing. Can teachers lie? And he confirmed that teachers can't lie if you ask them a direct question. And this makes Sai a reliable witness to the events of the rooftop, because again, she can't lie. Alright, showtime. Ayanokoji confirmed it's been 40 minutes since Kei made contact. She's been through several rounds of torture. Sai told Ayanokoji if he's not helping, he should call someone. Well, our boy did contact someone, but he told Sai he himself will be confronting Ruin. Sai could not hide the shock on her face. She warned him if he shows up, his peaceful life is over. Ayanokoji wasn't naive enough to believe Sai cared. Sai still had a tiny bit of leverage because she could always reveal Ayanokoji's identity. But by confronting Ruin, he's ripping that card right out of her hands. Sai muttered, maybe she misunderstood. Ayanokoji's like, oh? The chairman told Sai Ayanokoji was special and someone they need to protect because he was raised in a loveless environment. So the chairman and Sai came up with a strategy to have Ayanokoji become attached to the school so he'll want to stay. And then came the event of Ayanokoji's dad showing up, and that threw all of Sai's plans out the window. Ayanokoji agreed getting him attached was not a bad plan, but he assured Sai he wants to stay. Sai had a moment of self-reflection, maybe trying to use Ayanokoji and getting to Class A, those were the real problems. Ayanokoji found it funny how quickly Sai gave up. He corrected Sai, getting to Class A isn't impossible. Horikita is growing and taking leadership of Class D. However, Sai doubted Horikita. This likely stems from all that mishap with Kushida back in Volume 6. But Ayanokoji was confident Horikita can pull it off. Class D will flourish and Sai should focus on guiding them. However, Ayanokoji did admit to himself a different sort of ability is needed to get to Class A. Sai asked Ayanokoji what would he do when he confronts Ruin. Ayanokoji couldn't guarantee anything, but he'll do what he can. And the person our boy contacted just showed up. It was the former student council president Manabu. Sai was shocked. She asked if Manabu was gonna confront Ruin for him. Ayanokoji's like, do you really think Manabu's gonna do that? The answer was obviously no. Ayanokoji brought along Manabu as a backup witness in case Ruin goes crazy. Ayanokoji knew having a teacher here as a witness was ideal, but that option is off the table. Ayanokoji gave Manabu instructions. He was to climb up the stairs a few minutes after Ayanokoji climbs up. And when Ayanokoji's done, he doesn't need to talk to any of the students coming down. All he has to do is make sure they know that he was watching the entire time. Manabu agreed, but reminded our boy not to forget his promise. Ayanokoji's like, of course. Otherwise, Manabu might choose to forget what happened here. In exchange for this favor, Ayanokoji would keep Nagumo in check. Sai asked Ayanokoji what would he do if Manabu didn't agree to this. Ayanokoji's like, I wonder. Ayanokoji knew if it wasn't Manabu, it'd be Arisu. Ayanokoji made his way up the stairs step by step, but was soon met with Albert. Ayanokoji asked if he could pass. Albert barely noticed him as he pulled out a phone and started making a call. Ayanokoji wondered if he even spoke Japanese. Well, it wouldn't matter. In perfect English, Ayanokoji assured Albert he's the one they're looking for. Albert just stood there in silence, but Ayanokoji assured him everything will be solved today. No one else will interfere. Albert let our boy pass, but Albert keeping guard when Manabu arrives isn't good. So Ayanokoji addressed Albert, told him that today he'd crush Ruin, and Ruin stood no chance without Albert's help. Albert looked down to confirm no one else was coming, and then followed Ayanokoji up. The sky was dark on this dreadful day. Ayanokoji noticed Kei cowering near the fence. He also noticed the painted over camera, but once the doors closed, all eyes were on our boy. Ibuki whispered Ayanokoji's name in a state of utter disbelief. Kei was equally shocked. Ayanokoji apologized to Kei for being late, but Kei whispered, why did you even come? Ayanokoji's like, I promised to save you, so here I am. Ishizaki frantically asked Ruin if Ayanokoji was X, but Ibuki cut him off, saying there's no way. She believed X manipulated Ayanokoji to show up. Ruin told them both to shut the hell up, and Dragon Boy walked closer to our boy. One thing was for sure, Ruin was ecstatic. Ruin taunted Ayanokoji, saying, well, if it isn't Horikita's orbiter. Ruin asked what he's doing here. Ayanokoji's like, Kei sent me a message, so I'm here to save her. However, Ayanokoji conveniently left out the part where Ruin contacted him too. Why? Well, Ruin invited him up here to enjoy the hunt, but had no idea Ruin himself would become prey, and dragon meat is definitely on the menu. However, Ibuki kept going on and on about Ayanokoji being a pawn. Ruin asked Ibuki why she's so sure. Ibuki's disbelief stems from volume 3. It was the time when Kei got her underwear stolen. Ibuki was sure most of Class D would think she's the culprit. However, Ayanokoji told her he believes she's innocent. Well, in reality, he was faking it to make her do what he wants. But she doesn't know that. There's also the time when he helped her with the fortune teller. These events painted him as a good-natured idiot inside Ibuki's head. Ruin, on the other hand, did have Ayanokoji as a suspect. But notice something interesting. Why did Ruin ask for Ibuki's opinion? In most occasions, he's been rude to her or told her to just shut up. So why care now? Especially when Ayanokoji might as well be carrying a billboard saying, hey dumbasses, I'm X. It doesn't add up until you remember Ayanokoji planted the idea that Hirata is X. And again, Ayanokoji showing like this makes it look like Hirata is using him as a pawn. Ruin was sure X abandoned Kei, so this is sus. And what Ruin says next supports that. He declared he had two prime candidates for X, Ayanokoji and Hirata. And while the idiots were bickering amongst themselves, Ayanokoji just stood there with a blank look on his face. This is a fascinating development. He just told them he's X, but they won't believe him. His plan to make himself look like a pawn was too good. Guess our boy had to help them out. He explains they're doubting him because he's not acting like X. But maybe he's acting that way because he is X. To throw them off their game. Or maybe he had no more options left, so he had to show up. Either way, they shouldn't worry. He's the one they want. Ruin told our boy this was a bad move. If he really is X, he should have just abandoned Kei, not jump into a dangerous situation. Ruin demanded to know how he plans to get out of this. Ayanokoji's like, get out of what? There's no danger here. Ruin and his goons were not amused. Ayanokoji calmly explained he's here to save Kei. If they want to confirm he's X, they'll have to wait until the next exam. But unfortunately, Ruin is not the patient type. He threatened Ayanokoji. If he really is X, they know his identity. They also know Kei's past. If he leaves now, terrible things will happen tomorrow. Ayanokoji's like, oh, terrible things? What terrible things? Ayanokoji was not worried in the least, and this must be driving them mad. Ruin was impatient like a child. He commanded Ayanokoji to show him what he had planned. Our boy's like, there's no plan. He's not gonna do anything. Ishizaki said maybe Ayanokoji has backup, but Ruin's like, nah. If that was the case, Kei would not have come alone. And Ibuki kept going on and on about Ayanokoji not being X. And Ruin started to agree with her. He needed proof. Ayanokoji's like, fine, he'll give them something. So Ayanokoji told them all about the island exam. How he sabotaged Ibuki's camera to make her confront Horikita. He even told Ibuki how he found the transmitter by noticing the dirt in her fingernails. This was definitive proof he's X. Because only Sakura, Yamauchi, and Ayanokoji Ayanokoji would know this. They were the ones who found her. Ruin looked at Ibuki and was like, he's got you there. Ibuki still wasn't convinced, saying, okay, he's just smart. She couldn't accept it. X was manhandling them behind the scenes. Why would he show up right in front of them? It made no goddamn sense. Ruin shared the sentiment either Ayanokoji had a plan or he was an idiot. Our boy's like, I ain't got no tricks. Ayanokoji told them they knew Kei's past, so they had leverage. Ayanokoji can't act carelessly. Ruin engineered this whole situation to trap X. Naturally, Ayanokoji has no moves left. Ayanokoji congratulated Ruin. You succeeded, you have full control. And Ruin fed into this, boasting, yeah, he knows Kei's past. So Ayanokoji is at his mercy. Even if Ayanokoji wanted to report what they did to Kei, he couldn't. Ruin brandished his double-edged sword. Instead of offense, this time he used it for defense. If Ayanokoji turns in Ruin and his goons, Ruin will retaliate by exposing Kei. Kei will be destroyed. And it's doubtful Ayanokoji would do any meaningful damage to Class C, because unlike in exams, incidents in daily school life don't immediately lead to expulsion. Ayanokoji's like, alright, you win, so I'll be taking Kei now. However, Ruin was not satisfied. He pulled Kei up by her bangs, taunting Ayanokoji to show him what he has planned. Ayanokoji's like, sorry, I can't answer your expectations. Ruin looked like a baby who just had his candy stolen. Ayanokoji surrendered, saying he's been dancing in the palm of Ruin's hands. And deep down, Ayanokoji knew this was driving Ruin insane. X would not act this way. He wouldn't come here to save Kei and throw away his identity. The smile Ruin wore showed its cracks. Ibuki complained that if Ayanokoji was really X, this was a letdown. However, right then, Ayanokoji made his next move, saying it doesn't matter if he reveals himself. Other than Horikita and Kei, no one else knows he's X. So if his identity is leaked, he'll know someone from Class C did it. Ruin's like, so what if we leak it? What are you gonna do? Ayanokoji straight up said that if they leak his identity, he'll turn them into the school. Ruin stated the obvious, if he does that, he'll ruin Kei in retaliation. Ayanokoji's like, so he'll just have to sacrifice Kei, no big deal. Ruin was dumbfounded. Ayanokoji enlightened them. When he didn't show up, they thought he abandoned Kei. But when he did show up, they thought he'd magically save Kei at all costs. That was a mistake. Ruin accused Ayanokoji of trying to trick him. If Ayanokoji didn't show, he'd get the same outcome without revealing his identity. Make it make sense. However, Kei backed Ayanokoji, saying it's fine if he reveals her past. Ayanokoji's like, there you go. Whether they believe him or not, if he reveals what they did to Kei, it'll be a hell of a battle. Even if they don't get expelled, the school's not gonna go easy on them. It was a game of chicken and Ibuki and Ishizaki were visibly nervous. Ayanokoji might actually sacrifice Kei. They found out who X is. Maybe it's time to call it quits. Ruin clutched his head, laughing like a maniac. Ruin agreed if either side attacks, it'll be ugly. And to be honest, Kei's destruction isn't set in stone either. She can spin the narrative, painting herself as a brave girl who stood tall despite her past. But Ayanokoji knew Ruin would not let it end there. Ruin confessed what a letdown this was. Ayanokoji gave him his identity on a silver platter. What's more, he left the final option in Ruin's hands once again. This is a straight reference back to volume 6. Ayanokoji also left the option of expelling Kushida to Ruin, but at this point Ruin was sure Ayanokoji is X. Ruin grabbed Kei again and lifted her up. Kei was in pain but no longer afraid. Her eyes told Ruin she had absolute faith in Ayanokoji. The look she had told Ruin she'd readily volunteer her past if they dared reveal Ayanokoji's identity. Ruin told her to relax, her role was over, and he shoved her aside. Ruin praised Ayanokoji. He's kept Ruin entertained. Saw through his plans, they think alike. It's impossible for Ruin not to be interested. Ruin put everything into drawing out our boy, and Dragon Boy had made his decision. Ibuki understood Ruin and asked him what he was about to do. Ruin asked her why she's so mad. Ibuki didn't want him to put Class C at risk. Ruin's like, don't make me laugh. Ibuki has always been a lone wolf. Saying things like don't risk Class C is rich coming from her. Ibuki admitted she only followed Ruin for the benefit of Class C. Ayanokoji looks like he has nothing planned, so she can't approve what Ruin will do next. Ruin asked if she knew what he'd do. Ibuki's like, yeah, he'll make Ayanokoji yield through violence. Ruin has done the same with all his lackeys. He made them all bow down to him. And Ruin was determined to show Ayanokoji the gap that stood between them. However, Ibuki stayed firm. This will put Class C in danger. But out of nowhere, you just hear a loud bang. Ruin backhanded Ibuki. He shut her up. Dragon Boy couldn't care for what she had to say. He's having his fun. Just as Ayanokoji expected, Ruin made up his mind. Ruin proudly declared both sides here have to keep things a secret, which means what happens on the rooftop stays on the rooftop. Ruin ordered Albert to shut the door. Everyone knew what would happen next. Ayanokoji's like, oh no, my escape route is gone. Now you can do what you want. Ruin vowed to carve fear into Ayanokoji's bland face. He was underestimating Dragon Boy. Ayanokoji asked if he'd really resort to violence. Ruin boasted that violence is a force unmatched. No matter how smart you are, violence will make you kneel. Ruin planned to make quick work of Ayanokoji and then move on to Ichinose next. Ayanokoji's like, sure, violence will do people in, but for that to happen, you need to be stronger than your opponent. Ayanokoji asked if Ruin understood that. Ruin's like, what? Our boy elaborated. The four of them won't be enough to stop him. For a second, everything went silent until a maniacal laughter echoed through the rooftop. Ruin explained to his lackeys what they failed to grasp. Ayanokoji said he won't lose to the likes of them. Ruin told Ishizaki to go show Ayanokoji what's up. Ishizaki was hesitant, but Ruin ordered him to go. He's free to beat Ayanokoji silly. As Ishizaki approached our boy, Kei screamed for them to stop. She pleaded they get nothing from beating up Ayanokoji. Ruin told Kei to butt out. She should be grateful. Because of Ayanokoji, she won't have her past revealed. Ruin shoved Kei, but Kei bounced back ready to attack Ruin. But Ayanokoji told her to stand down. There's no reason to worry. Ishizaki stepped up apologizing. This isn't personal, he's got orders. Ayanokoji's like, whatever. It didn't matter because things were going according to plan. Ishizaki swung at Ayanokoji, but our boy was trying to figure out if it was even a real punch. It was so slow, even a middle schooler could dodge it. Ayanokoji effortlessly caught his fist. Our boy looked Ishizaki straight in his eyes. If he's gonna do this, he better take it seriously. Unfortunately, Ishizaki's brain was as slow as his fists because he had no idea how much trouble he was in. Ayanokoji mercilessly clenched down on Ishizaki's hand. Ishizaki screamed in agony, falling to the ground, trembling. Ibuki watched helplessly. Ishizaki cried, clawed, anything to get himself free, but it was useless. Albert was the first to understand what's happening and rushed in. A massive shadow appeared behind Ayanokoji. Albert attacked from the left, assuming Ayanokoji would either dodge or use both hands to defend, giving Ishizaki time to escape. But nope, everyone just heard a dull smack. Ayanokoji stopped Albert's swing with only one hand, while still crushing Ishizaki into oblivion. It was at this moment Albert realized they were all screwed. Ibuki asked if they were messing around. She couldn't tell if Albert was serious, or maybe she just denied reality. Ayanokoji released Ishizaki, who fell to the ground writhing in agony. Our boy's grip strength is not 60, I'll tell you that much. Ruin ordered Albert to go all out and the powerhouse came swinging. Ayanokoji decided to block a few blows just to test Albert out. Even for our boy, too many hits posed a danger. Ayanokoji delivered a full-powered punch to Albert's abdomen. The hit was shallow. Ayanokoji speculated Albert's not just genetically gifted. He's put in the time to train his body. His frame was like steel. Well, that didn't matter. Ayanokoji would just take his time ripping him apart piece by piece. No matter how much you train, human beings are still bags of meat, quite fragile. There are parts you can't train like the solar plexus. Ayanokoji launched an attack there. Albert realized this and turned his body to evade Ayanokoji's blow. And while Albert is powerful when it came to matching Ayanokoji's speed, he might as well be standing still. The attack Ayanokoji launched was a fake. Our boy used this opportunity to deliver a sharp jab to Albert's throat. Like a vicious spear, it pierced Albert's defense and stole his consciousness. Albert made a gargling noise as he fell to the ground. Ishizaki recovered and thought the best way to launch a surprise attack was to yell out like a moron. Ayanokoji just sighed, saying, if you're gonna come at me, don't shout. Ayanokoji lightly kicked Ishizaki's left knee and toppled him, then spun around to deliver a kick right to his face, and just for safe measure added in a final punch mid-air before Ishizaki collapsed. All Ibuki, Ruin, and Kei could do was watch, speechless, and burn that spectacle into their minds. Ruin was like, oh, so that's why he's so confident. Ibuki questioned if the stage they ended up setting favored Ayanokoji. Ayanokoji looked at Ibuki and was like, are you serious? She knew full well Ruin would resort to violence. So why in the hell would Ayanokoji set up a situation that favored Ruin? Ruin's like, hold up, he himself set up the stage. What is Ayanokoji on about? Ayanokoji's like, do you really not get it? Ayanokoji explained the situation wasn't set up by Ruin, it was set up by him. As early as Volume 1, Ayanokoji knew one thing. If you don't report something to the school, it didn't happen. This was the basis for setting up this entire rooftop scenario, to create a situation where neither side can go to the school, giving Ruin an excuse to use his favorite tool, violence. Ruin actually thought he was under control. Ayanokoji would shatter that reality. If Ayanokoji never wanted to be revealed, why would he use Manabe as a spy? Ayanokoji was certain as soon as he did, it would trigger a search. Ruin would find find Manabe and then learn about Kei. Dragon Boy could not refute any of this. From there, Ayanokoji knew Ruin would use his go-to. He would pressure Class D. Following Miyaki around, confronting Koenji, invading Class D, Ruin thought he was coiling around his victim, but in reality, Ayanokoji was always in the lead. It was easy for Ayanokoji to make Ruin do what he wanted, because he knew once Ruin starts, he does not stop. And none of this is new. This is Ayanokoji's go-to tactic. He will drip feed you information and make you think what you want to think. He did the same to Ishizaki back in Volume 2, when he set up the fake cameras. In Volume 3, he engineered the entire scenario when Horikita was caught by Ibuki and Ruin, giving them false info on who the leader was. In Volume 4, he directed Manabe and her friends to target Kei by giving them the info that Kei might have bullied their friend. And you know the whole hidden plot about how he made Ruin think Hirata was X. He's got this down to a science. And just like that, Dragon Boy's advantage was gone. Ruin apologized. Ayanokoji is indeed brilliant. Ibuki, however, was steaming. She rushed Ayanokoji, launching a kick right at him, giving him front row seats to see right up her skirt. Horny Koji does not sleep. While admiring the view, Ayanokoji calmly evaded every attack. Ibuki was at her limit. She knew Class C was desperate. She couldn't play it safe, so she closed the distance. It improves her accuracy but leaves her vulnerable. Ayanokoji thought she was good. Back in Volume 3, she didn't get a fair fight with Horikita because Horikita was sick. But even if Horikita is healthy, she might lose to Ibuki. However, Ayanokoji was in a different league. Even though she closed the distance, she could not land a single blow. She impatiently asked Ayanokoji, "What the hell are you?" Our boy replied calmly, "He's exactly what she sees." This lit a fire inside Ibuki. She hates being underestimated. She yelled out over and over again, "You piss me off." Unfortunately, Ayanokoji was tired of seeing her underwear. In the blink of an eye, he came in close. Ibuki barely had time for an audible response. Ayanokoji ruthlessly grabbed Ibuki's neck and slammed it to the ground. Ibuki's eyes went white and she stopped moving. But this wasn't a fight to the death, so he made sure she survived. Ayanokoji informed Ruin, "Violence isn't something only he and his goons can wield." However, Ayanokoji did commend Ruin for staying sane after watching all that go down. Kei just sat there on the cold ground in utter disbelief. Ruin gave Ayanokoji a slow clap. Not only is he sharp, he's also first class when it comes to violence. Dragon Boy heavily underestimated him. However, Ayanokoji could still tell Ruin wasn't afraid. Ruin proudly declared, "When it comes to a fight, physical strength isn't everything. The strength of your heart matters." Without warning, Ruin lowered his stance and aimed at Ayanokoji's abdomen. Our boy instinctively jumped back. He had no intentions of taking Ruin's attacks. Ayanokoji extended his hands to grab onto Ruin's hair, but Ruin countered by blocking his fist. Unfortunately, Dragon Boy was not paying attention. If he was, he'd know Ayanokoji's move was a fake. Our boy swiftly launched a kick, connecting right to Ruin's ribs. Ruin let out a silent scream as he moved to create distance. Ayanokoji's like, "Not bad." Our hero analyzed Ruin's strength. He's better than Ishizaki. Even after a direct hit, he's still standing. But Ruin's attacks are nothing compared to Albert's. Ruin, on the other hand, was having a great time. The idea of making a comeback after being heavily outmatched turned Ruin on like nothing else. Ruin kept up his onslaught. Looking at his style, it's not martial arts. It's a mishmash of things Ruin picked up from street fights. At this point, Ayanokoji used a lot of energy dodging Ruin's attacks. Of course, Ayanokoji could knock him out, but not yet. Ayanokoji put up his hands and intercepted the blows. Unlike Albert, Ruin is manageable. Ruin started taunting Ayanokoji, asking why he isn't fighting back. Ayanokoji told him he has his own ideas. Ruin was hell-bent on beating Ayanokoji and finding out what those ideas were. Ayanokoji asked Ruin if he thought he could really win. Ruin's like, "What, you think you're invincible?" Ayanokoji just shrugged. He can't imagine himself losing here. Our boy wondered what kept Ruin going. What was Dragon Boy seeing that he could not? Ruin egged him on, saying even if he loses here, it does not matter. There's still tomorrow and the next day and the next. He would attack Ayanokoji anywhere, even in the toilet when he's taking a dump. Ruin would conquer him from every angle. Ayanokoji asked Ruin if he's afraid of losing. Ruin boldly declared he's never felt fear. Now that's interesting. Ayanokoji realized the source of Ruin's confidence. Ruin did not feel fear because he wasn't afraid of the consequences of his actions. Ruin always had the mindset, even if I lose, I'll just keep coming. Ruin would attack again and again to wear you down, and eventually win. Ruin boasted once Ayanokoji feels pain, he'll know fear. Our boy's like, "Oh, Then teach me. Ruin was happy to oblige. Ayanokoji let Ruin grab his shoulder. Ruin delivered a brutal kick right to Ayanokoji's abdomen. Kei cried out Ayanokoji's name in desperation, but it was needless worry. Ayanokoji let it happen. Ruin didn't stop delivering kick after kick all in the same spot. Ruin got in close and Ayanokoji guarded his face. Ruin faked going in for attack with his right fist and instead delivered a blow with his knee. It made direct contact and Ayanokoji fell back. The pain Ruin was so eager to show him spread through his body. Ruin asked if he understood now, and Ayanokoji's like, nope, he doesn't understand jack. It's just pain, nothing more. Ruin asked if Ayanokoji was like him and felt no fear. Ayanokoji's like, nope. Our boy knew what fear was. He knew what it meant to be a loser. He's seen countless people break down in front of his eyes. After a while, it stopped being fear. It just felt cold because Ayanokoji realized no matter how much suffering and pain others go through, it didn't concern him because he would never experience the same. As long as he can protect himself, that's all that matters. He'll be the winner. Here's a key difference between Ayanokoji and Ruin. Ruin doesn't feel fear because he's not afraid of failure. Ruin thinks he has an unlimited amount of opportunities, so he'll eventually win. But Ayanokoji full well knows what fear is because he knows what it means to be a loser. He's seen the consequences of losing up close. He understands every action has a consequence, so he makes his plans airtight, weighs every option, and considers all scenarios. A great example is just in this volume. If he couldn't get Manabu as a witness, he would have gotten Arisu. He always has a backup plan. While in stark contrast to this, Ruin's plans are sloppy and reckless. A great example is earlier. He didn't even consider the fact that Ayanokoji might sacrifice Kei after showing up. Ruin impatiently rushed Ayanokoji, but this time our boy blocked him. There was no reason to take his clumsy blows anymore. Ruin asked Ayanokoji what he was up to. Our boy's like, I'm just testing a theory. Ruin did not appreciate being underestimated. Even though there was a gap between them, Ruin kept up the momentum. Ayanokoji calmly looked at the situation. It would be one thing if Ruin was full of blind rage, kinda like Sudo, but that wasn't the case. Competent fighters feel despair when they're outclassed. The bigger the gap in skill, the deeper the despair. And the difference between Ayanokoji and Ruin was a chasm. Yet Ayanokoji did not feel an inch of despair from Dragon Boy. Ayanokoji deliberately took blows to build up Ruin's confidence. Then he would shatter Ruin's spirit by beating him. Looks like our boy miscalculated. Ruin is tougher than he looks. But it's only a small miscalculation. It only meant Ruin would have to go through a lot more pain. Meanwhile, Ruin kept going, asking Ayanokoji how he got so strong. He asked Ayanokoji how it felt to look down on others. He better turned him on. Our boy was frank. He never looked down on anyone else. He doesn't care enough to. Ruin didn't buy it. Human beings are full of greed. Ayanokoji did agree in his head that he was greedy, but that's a story for another day. The situation had gone on enough. Ruin approached and Ayanokoji grabbed his right arm. Ruin took this as an invitation to knee Ayanokoji in the face. But nuh-uh, no more free passes. Ayanokoji swiftly pulled him in and delivered a punch right to his face. Ruin went flying. Ayanokoji made sure to hold back so Ruin wouldn't go unconscious. He's not done yet. Ayanokoji got on top of Ruin, mercilessly landing blow after blow. He asked Ruin, "You've never felt fear, right?" The madman proudly declared, "Yes, I've never felt fear, not even once." Ayanokoji's attacks did a number on Ruin's face. He was swollen all over. It was so bad Ruin could barely see. But Ruin didn't give up. He kept trying to fight in that miserable state. It didn't do him much good though. None of his blows landed. Soon his laughter turned grim, but he was still talking. Ruin admitted he's lost before more times than he can count. At this point, Ayanokoji could barely make out what he was saying. Ruin's mouth was cut up, oozing blood onto the floor. Doesn't matter, Ayanokoji kept raining on blows one after another. Ruin complained it was getting hard to talk. But even then, Ayanokoji did not feel a hint of fear from Ruin. Ruin claimed violence brought out the realness in humans. Those who enact it and those who suffer from it. The madman just lay there laughing, provoking Ayanokoji to keep on going. Ruin's like, it must be fun for Ayanokoji. He can act as cocky as he wants since he wields such strength. Ruin's babbling made no difference. Ayanokoji kept on going. Things were getting ugly. Ruin's face bled inside and out. Still, not an ounce of fear from this lunatic. No sense of self-preservation. Ayanokoji asked Ruin if he's had enough, but Ruin wasn't done. He taunted Ayanokoji to keep on coming. Ruin wouldn't give up, not until Ayanokoji knocked him unconscious. Ruin was crazy enough to risk his life. His body was on as though his face writhed in pain, but Ruin's like, it hurts, that's all. Ruin declared even if Ayanokoji wins, it means nothing. Tomorrow is another day and Ruin will attack, and he'll have the last laugh. Ayanokoji understood Ruin. He wears his opponents down. If you make an enemy out of him, you'll never rest easy. Ruin urged Ayanokoji to to go on, to claim victory. It's within reach. Ruin was still laughing. He claimed when the strong dominate the weak, they feel good. But that pleasure is short-lived. Fear lurks on the other side of that coin. Once someone gets a taste of superiority, they crave it. Hold on to it for dear life. Ruin asked Ayanokoji what he was feeling. Does he want to win? Is he angry? Is he excited? Annoyed? What did winning feel like? Ayanokoji didn't understand his blabber. Ayanokoji couldn't even see his own expression. But something small like this would never move him. Not an inch of emotion would occupy his face. By now, he's punched Ruin so many times he's lost count. That didn't mean he was about to stop. Left, right, left, right. He knocked Ruin silly. Finally, Ayanokoji could see. Fear did exist within Dragon Boy. And with a final strike, Ruin lost all consciousness. Ruin wanted to manipulate Ayanokoji's heart. But unfortunately, Ayanokoji did not have a heart to manipulate. With his mission complete, Ayanokoji stood up. Kei was freezing. He needed to help her. He apologized to Kei for putting her in this situation. He asked if she was hurt. Kei said she's fine, just numb from the cold. Ayanokoji helped her up. Her hand was freezing to the touch. Ayanokoji asked if she was disappointed in him. Kei was like, obviously he betrayed her. Ayanokoji asked why didn't she sell him out. Kei declared it was for her own sake. But then Kei collapsed into Ayanokoji's chest, trembling. She cried out she was scared, so scared. Ayanokoji comforted her. There's nothing to worry about. She can just think about this all later. But for now, all she needs to know is that she's free. No one can use her past against her anymore. Given what Kei went through, her emotions must be a mess. First the cruise ship, now this whole ordeal. Realizing Ayanokoji betrayed her. But finally she'll get the fresh start she's been dreaming of. Ayanokoji admitted he did hurt her. He won't ask for forgiveness, but promise one thing. If something like this happens again, he'll save her. Kei softly whispered Ayanokoji's name. Ayanokoji realized despite everything that went down, Kei still hasn't switched her parasitic destination from him. She's reached a point where she can't go on without him. So no matter what happens, as long as Ayanokoji stays at the school, she'll stay strong. That's why Ayanokoji showed up as late as he did. If he saved her earlier, sure, her dependency would grow. But there's no telling what would happen if she was placed in another situation like this. By waiting until the very last second, he etched an idea into her mind. That she could put her absolute faith in Ayanokoji. That no matter how bad things look, he'll save her. Even if it's at the very last second. Also, Ayanokoji learned that Kei is someone who won't easily betray him. As evidenced by her not giving up his name. And even if Kei gave up his name, it wouldn't matter. In fact, that's what Ayanokoji originally planned for. He fully expected Kei to give him up. Kei would then feel guilty for betraying Ayanokoji. And Ayanokoji would use that guilt to control her. He did not want to give up Kei. Usefulness is secondary. The only thing that matters is keeping her close. Now, I gave you Ayanokoji's monologue from the novel as it is. Do you notice anything strange? What in the hell is Ayanokoji talking about? We saw Kei's point of view. The reason she didn't betray him isn't because she's a parasite. In fact, it's actually the opposite. She didn't betray him because she gave up being a parasite. It's literally her entire monologue. So what gives? And for that matter, why did Ayanokoji use Manabu as a witness? Didn't he just spend a lot of time figuring out Sai can be a reliable witness? He said a teacher is ideal but not feasible. Why? And the biggest question which Ruin asked over and over again, why did Ayanokoji show up to the rooftop? If he really wants to step down, then why show? You could argue that it's to keep Kei under his control, but if he's stepping down, why does he even need that? He doesn't. In fact, if you read the novel, there's no logical explanation for why he does any of this. Because the reason is not logical, and none of it will make sense until we dive into the final hidden plot of Volume 7. A plot that's been building even before the start of Volume 1, and we finally have enough information to cover it. I guarantee it'll change the story as you know it moving forward. But before I can get into it, I have a confession to make. I was wrong. And not only that, I'm glad I was wrong. Because I made a mistake back in Volume 6, I not only stumbled upon this hidden plot, but answered a question both you and I have had since the start of the series. What is Ayanokoji's real personality? Is he really just cold-hearted and sees everyone as tools, or is there more there? Let's get into it. So first, where did I mess up? Well, back in Volume 6, I told you guys about how Ayanokoji knew about Horikita's plans, but he lied to us in his monologue saying he couldn't have come up with a plan plan like that. In fact, here's what he says word for word in the official translation. I couldn't even come up with something like this myself. However, we know that's false because he used the knowledge of Horikita's plan as leverage to strike a deal with Ruin. Reading this, I assumed he lies in his monologue. Pretty clear cut, right? Not exactly. A user from Reddit and now my friend Wicked reached out to me, and he is, in my opinion, one of the smartest fans Classroom Delete has. He double-checked with the Japanese version of the novel and pointed out a mistake. That line doesn't read he couldn't have come up with something like that. It more reads he never imagined Horikita would come up with a countermeasure like that, which is so different. So in the Japanese version, he didn't lie to us. Ayanokoji was indeed surprised Horikita came up with a countermeasure, because originally in Ayanokoji's plan, he bluffed. He had no idea whether or not Horikita got the questions approved. He just lied to Ruin saying she did. The only thing that mattered is whether or not Ruin believed him, which he did. And Horikita's countermeasure turned out to be a happy accident. So yeah, Horikita was a non-factor in that volume. This blew my mind and got me thinking. When I first posted the volume 5 video, someone left a similar comment, so I dug it up. It was regarding the highlight moment when Ayanokoji raced Manabu. Ayanokoji said word for word, "I've never ever ran seriously in my life." And if you think about it, it's basically saying he ran as fast as he could. And I'm confident because later he says we ran at full speed. But as you can see, Isaiah points out in the Japanese version, he said it's the fastest he's run outside the White Room. Again, very different meaning. So why am I telling you all this? Well, it's to take back the claim I made in volume 6. Ayanokoji does not lie in his monologues. And I'm using a very strict definition of lying, as in he said something and turns out to be false later. And in fact, upon further discussion with Wicked, there's two main cases where it looks like Ayanokoji is lying. The first one is where we're missing these tiny details, like you saw with the racing one. Big difference. Another one, and Ayanokoji is famous for doing this. He'll talk in weird conditional sentences, like he'll use a lot of ifs, buts, and perhaps. Here's an example from volume 1. The context is Ayanokoji trying to make friends when he first arrived at the school. If I carelessly jump in and talk to the unknown student, I might get beaten up by someone else. We know very few people can match Ayanokoji at the school, but he talks like it can go either way. Also, to be clear, he's still an unreliable narrator. He's very misleading at times, but he does not lie in his monologues, so when he says something as fact, you can trust it. And that will be important to understanding what happens in this volume. So when I was rereading the earlier volumes to find examples, I came across something weird. Like when I first read the volumes, I thought nothing of it. But now, knowing what I know, Ayanokoji's monologues are so goofy. Let me give you an example. This is about Horikita. If she were a kind girl, she'd say something like, "Oh, well, there's nothing to be done, so I'd feel bad to wake you, so I'll forgive you. If you don't get up, I'll kiss you." My god, I couldn't say that without cringing. Get my point, right? This feels so out of character. How did we get from this lightheartedness to saying all people are tools and the infamous spread your legs scene? What happened between volume 1 and 3? Is he just faking his personality? If that's what you're thinking, you are 100% right. In the beginning volumes, Ayanokoji straight up faked his personality, and it's our first clue into finding out who the real Ayanokoji is. So why is he faking his personality? To understand this, we'll need to look at the events before he came to the school. And thanks to the conversation with his dad in part 1, we now know. So here's the timeline. Ayanokoji is in the White Room. The White Room shuts down for a year. Matsuo tells Ayanokoji about the school where his dad can't reach him. Ayanokoji, wanting to decide his own path, comes to the school. Put yourself in his shoes. You've had almost no contact with the outside world. How should you think? How should you act? How would you feel? You wouldn't know, and neither did Ayanokoji. So what did he do? He improvised. He studied what a normal high schooler should be like. He emulated that to the best of his abilities, including the way a normal high schooler would think. That's why you get the monologues that feel so out of character, because they are. It's Ayanokoji's attempt at figuring out what normal is. Here's a bit of his monologue back from volume 1 that best showcases this. What on earth are friends anyway? Where do friends come from? Do people become friends after sharing a meal? Can you become friends with someone after you walk to the bathroom together for the first time? The more I thought about it, the more I wondered, what is friendship? Is it something deep and meaningful? I tried to piece it together. And also, we get very big clues in volume 4.5. When Ayanokoji eats ice cream for the first time, Horikita says this about him. That's because he has a face like a doll. His expression never changes. So even though Ayanokoji faked his personality on the inside, on the outside he looked apathetic with zero facial expressions. This is a big reason why why anime watchers get freaked out when they read the light novel for the first time. The monologues just feel out of place. The anime cut out the monologues, but they were faithful to how he looked on the outside. That's why you get this disconnect. And that's not the only clue in volume 4.5. The fortune teller scene is significant. Here's something the fortune teller says about Ayanokoji. There are negatives. You won't have the blessings of your parents or your family. However, the rest is up to you individually. You alone decide what you can do and what you can't do. A straight reference to the White Room and Ayanokoji's relationship with his dad. But what she says next drives home the point about the fake personality. You don't need to be pessimistic, and you don't need to act like you're starring in a comedy either. A clear reference to Ayanokoji faking his personality. Alright, so the wacky side isn't him. Then his personality has to be the cold and calculating side, right? If that's what you're thinking, you are 100% wrong. And I know this is gonna be a hot take, so let me give you my reasoning and at the end you can decide for yourself. And to go further, I need to tell you a little bit about the White Room. I promise, no spoilers. In fact, we're not gonna talk about events past volume 7. I'll just add information to the conversation that happened between Ayanokoji and his dad. In part 1, Ayanokoji's dad mentions that no one in the White Room has achieved the results Ayanokoji has. That sentence does not do Ayanokoji justice. Instead of years, the White Room is divided up into generations, and Ayanokoji was part of the 4th demonic generation. The toughest curriculum ever experienced within the White Room. It was brutal. Those who failed had no purpose, no value to anyone. That was drilled into their heads. This generation placed an emphasis on individualism, which really translated to every man for themselves. The early days in the White Room weren't great for Ayanokoji. Due to the harsh environment, he cried a lot. We have proof of this in volume 2. He mentions crying a lot as a kid. At times it was so bad he couldn't stop. However, soon Ayanokoji's talents came to light. No matter the challenge, he would exceed all expectations. He became the hallmark of what success looked like within the White Room. And this was huge because compliments did not happen there. In fact, if you'd mess up, the instructors would tell you to shape up and be more like Ayanokoji. The instructors fanned a sense of rivalry within the White Roomers. Unsurprisingly, this built up resentment and Ayanokoji was shunned, stuck in a messed up environment with a gruesome regimen and no support. Day in and day out, Ayanokoji would watch people drop out, collapse, unable to take it anymore. Ayanokoji had to adapt. So Ayanokoji created a persona, a defense mechanism to help him survive. A persona that believed in winning above everything, because that's the only thing that kept you safe within the White Room. So when Ayanokoji randomly flips a switch and becomes cold, brutal, uncaring, that's his White Room persona taking over. Because let me ask you, when was the first time you saw this behavior from Ayanokoji? Volume 3, right? When he used Horikita as an scapegoat to win the island exam. What do you think happened to Ayanokoji to trigger that response? That's right, Sai threatened him. For the first time since he arrived at the school, he was in danger. His White Room persona manifested to keep himself safe. You'll always notice this persona act in a defensive capacity. And Ayanokoji's actions aren't the only things that change. So do his monologues. That's why out of nowhere, sometimes Ayanokoji just turns dark. Remember that whole badass scene you saw in the rain where Ayanokoji was holding Horikita? Where he says all people are tools and winning is the only thing that matters? That's our first introduction to Ayanokoji's White Room persona. So what is Ayanokoji's real personality? The truth, we don't know, and neither does he. That's one of the reasons he came to the school. He even talks about this himself in volume 2. The truth was that it felt like I'd just been born as an individual. When I enrolled at the school, I wasn't fully formed. I was like liquid or moldable clay. Developing into a full person took time, and I had yet to completely understand how to interact or the correct way to express myself. Why would a person with a fully formed personality say any of this? They wouldn't. Even Ayanokoji's dad points it out. He could not recognize the Ayanokoji he was talking to. It's because his dad has only seen the White Room persona. Now, a persona one uses to keep themselves safe. Where have I heard this before? Oh, right. Kei. And that brings us to the events of Volume 4, which help us understand everything that went down in Volume 7. Ayanokoji had his back against the wall. Sai blackmailed him. White Room persona fully in effect. Ayanokoji painted Ruin as the villain he needs to defeat. He noticed Kei. He noticed her interactions with Manabe. The fact that she's putting up a front, he realized he can use her. Originally, Ayanokoji was not going to partner with Kei the way he's doing right now. She was only supposed to be bait to draw out Ruin, so Ayanokoji can give him a good good beating. Again, remember, his only goal at this point was to keep himself safe by appeasing Sai. That's what his White Room persona dictated. Like Ayanokoji said, he engineered this entire showdown with Ruin. Ayanokoji then moved to set up the bullying event with Kei, and she was broken. We get the iconic spread your legs scene. Ayanokoji looks into Kei's eyes and notices the darkness. This might be the most important scene in that entire volume. Ayanokoji mentions those that carry darkness within their hearts grow closer in a similar environment. What Ayanokoji is implying is that Kei is similar to him. They were both shunned when they were kids. Ayanokoji for his excellence and Kei for her bullying. No one showed them love or compassion. They were subject to cruelty. They had to endure it all alone. He saw his past self within her and felt close, a sense of camaraderie, a sense of attachment. The first person he could truly relate to. Not only that, the White Room persona and parasitic persona are similar. So Ayanokoji changed his mind and decided to create this partnership. Kei's parasitic persona would receive protection and Ayanokoji would receive help for his plans. But there's a problem. Kei's perception of him was terrible, and for good reason. Even though Ayanokoji didn't assault her, he did unspeakable things to her. So we move on to the events of volume 4.5. This volume greatly improves Ayanokoji's image in Kei's mind. Ayanokoji sabotages the idiot trio's plan. And you'll remember Kei saying Ayanokoji was the only decent guy among them. She starts thinking maybe he didn't do the terrible things because he wanted to, but because he had to. You'll also see how Ayanokoji thinks about Kei in volume 4.5. This is a line right from his monologue. This might be overestimating my capabilities, but if my existence can bring healing to this person, then as a person, this is something worth being happy. This is regarding him wanting to help Kei with her trauma. If she's just a tool, why would he say any of this? Also, how Kei feels about Ayanokoji changes from this point on. You can see this reflected in volume 5. She constantly looks to Ayanokoji for guidance. She even starts calling him by his first name. And in volume 6, Kei gets insanely jealous of Sato, going as far as to trying to limit her interactions with Ayanokoji, and even hounding Ayanokoji about his intentions. Also, when Kei sent him that birthday message, that was significant. It's the first time someone wished Ayanokoji happy birthday in his life. He felt good seeing that message. That's why he hesitated to delete it. All these scenes matter, because in volume 7, their entire relationship turns upside down. Sai's lies are revealed. Ayanokoji no longer has a reason to help Class D. The showdown he planned with Ruin in volume 4 no longer needs to happen. If he lays low, Ruin will leave him alone. And most importantly, he no longer has a reason to associate with Kei, so he decides to abandon Kei. That's the logical conclusion his brain comes to. But then something significant happens. Remember that conversation where he tells Kei he's gonna cut off all communication with her? Go back and listen to it again and maybe even reread it. You'll notice Ayanokoji drags on the conversation. He talks about things he would never talk about. Even Kei points out at the beginning of the conversation how out of character this is. It's because Ayanokoji had second thoughts. He was indecisive. The conversation reminds him of all the good times he's had with Kei. So he changes his mind again and decides to save Kei and confront Ruin. That's the reason Ayanokoji showed up to the rooftop, to keep the bond he had with Kei, even if it meant Ruin would know how strong he is. That's why he mentions her use being secondary. It was never about her use. It was about keeping her close. Now that we have this context, why is Ayanokoji tripping? Why does he still think Kei is a parasite when she's clearly not? Well, it goes back to what Ayanokoji planned earlier. He assumed Kei would give up his name based on what he knows about her, and then he'd guilt trip her in order to keep their relationship going. And we have evidence of Kei being prone to feeling guilty. Back in volume 4.5, when Ayanokoji asked Kei to stop bullying Sakura, Kei admitted to feeling sorry for her. In volume 4, when Kei stepped on Manabe's shoes, she apologized. Ayanokoji knows all of this. But then Kei had a moment of growth and Ayanokoji completely misunderstood it. He thought it was because she refused to switch her parasitic destination, not because she renewed her self-worth and no longer wanted to be a parasite. This was way out of his expectations. Don't you find it strange we got 2 points of view for this entire situation? It's because the author wanted to show us both sides. The person who underwent growth and the person who witnessed the growth and misunderstood it. It also humanizes Ayanokoji. He can make mistakes. But this also raises another question. Why did Ayanokoji Ayanokoji get Kei's growth wrong? It's because he couldn't understand it. Ayanokoji and Kei do have similarities, but there's one area where they're fundamentally different. Forgiveness. Kei easily forgives others. She didn't hold a grudge against Ibuki for stealing her underwear. When Ayanokoji mentioned wanting to expel Manabe and her friends, Kei did not jump at it. Her ability to easily forgive others stems from her abuse back in middle school. She became desensitized to small things. They're nothing compared to what she had to endure. Ayanokoji, on the other hand, holds a grudge like no other. You can see it the second he no longer had to listen to Sai, he was nasty to her. And in future volumes, you'll see more examples, trust me. So in his mind, Kei forgiving him made no sense, because if placed in a similar situation, he never would. This line from his monologue best explains how he thinks Kei sees him. If there's anything that could be said about me at the moment, it would be that Kei sees me as a very eerie person. Their relationship is twisted. It shouldn't exist. He even admits that to himself. I protected her from Manabe and her group, and if not for that, we would have never known each other like this. The difference between a gloomy student and a popular girl is that of the heavens and earth. And Ayanokoji knew the only way he could keep their relationship going is if their personas could feed off of each other, to keep their twisted bond going. People would probably say it's a twisted relationship, but still, that was certainly the only thing connecting us both. Which answers our last question, why did he bring Manabu as a witness? Let's be real, Sai is a perfectly good witness. But why did he say she isn't feasible for this plan? Well, if you look at his motivation, she isn't. Because his desire is not to just have a witness. He wants to keep Kei close to him. That's why he used Manabu. So he's faced with a new challenge, Nagumo. A challenge where he'll need Kei's help. Another problem. Another reason for them to work together. Remember how he said he'd use Arisu if it wasn't Manabu? Same purpose. He'd owe Arisu a favor. And what do you think Arisu is gonna ask for? She'll want to challenge Ayanokoji. Again, giving him another reason to work together with Kei. I also believe Ayanokoji not forgiving Sai is a reason why he didn't want to use her. He does not want to owe her any favors. Okay, so is Ayanokoji good, evil, bad, not bad, twisted? I can't make that decision for you. All I can do is give you the facts so you can come to your own conclusion. But I will say something. It's been a hot minute since I've seen a character written with this much thought and care. Listen, there's a lot of OP main character stories out there. It's not exactly rare. But there's a reason Classroom of the Elite stands out year after year claiming top spots. It really is one of a kind. And this rooftop event was breathtaking. Don't get me wrong. The part where Ayanokoji beats the living daylights out of Ruin was hype. I was at the edge of my seat looking forward to every word, but I had no idea underneath the surface, the author put together this incredible storyline where Ayanokoji slowly builds a bond with Kei, and when he's faced with a major decision, he chooses to abandon his peaceful school life, the thing he's been working towards since he arrived at the school, to save the first human connection he's ever experienced, creating a huge turning point for his character and bringing us back to our original theme. Change is all around us, and that's just beautiful. But the story is not over yet, and we have much to cover. Ayanokoji told Kei that downstairs Manabu and Sai are waiting to help. Kei understood but asked Ayanokoji what he was gonna do. Our boy told her he needs to clean up. Kei left and it was time to get to business. He couldn't just leave 4 corpses on the rooftop. Ayanokoji gently slapped each of them, waking them up. Ruin asked if Ayanokoji thought this was really over. Oh boy. Ayanokoji's like, you still wanna go? Ruin proudly declared he'd do whatever it took to win. Ayanokoji asked if he'd report that he beat him up. Ruin laughed, saying, nah, that's lame. Ayanokoji knew if it got Ruin a win, he'd consider it. Ruin claimed that he could make it all look like a trap that Ayanokoji set up, because only Ruin's side sustained injuries. Our boy informed Ruin that he should not try that, because Manabu is watching. Evidence is on Ayanokoji's side. He can prove Ruin destroyed the cameras. While Ruin was carrying out his plan, Ayanokoji was chilling with his group. That's the reason Ayanokoji went to hang out with his group in the very beginning, to have a reliable alibi. Ruin was shocked. Ayanokoji could have had Manabu watching from the start, but he chose not to. Ayanokoji was like, yup, our boy knew Ruin would not stop coming at him until he was smacked. If he had a witness from the very beginning, Ruin would not come at him like he did. Ruin asked Ayanokoji if he thought he'd take this lying down. Ayanokoji was frank, yeah, you will take this L. Ayanokoji explained Ruin's issue was his order of enemies. If he went for Ichinose first and then Arisu Arisu, he'd have a chance by the time he fought Ayanokoji. But curiosity killed the cat and Ruin overextended. Ruin laughed at how straight up Ayanokoji was. Ayanokoji would have liked to say he'd take a rematch, but at this point intends to keep a low profile. So he'd really appreciate it if Ruin went for someone else. For a bit, Ruin was in deep thought, understanding Ayanokoji had a witness and had them keep their distance. Ruin realized the gravity of the situation, that if he keeps going after Ayanokoji, our boy can sacrifice his identity and Kei's past in order to drive them into a corner. Ayanokoji's like, yep, he'd like to avoid it, but if it comes down to it, Ayanokoji has that option. And what's more, Ruin can't keep his promise, because Ayanokoji can drag Albert, Ishizaki, and Ibuki into this. Their punishment will be harsh. Ruin understood what this meant. If he's leading Class C, they're handicapped. But Ayanokoji assured him as long as he doesn't target Class D, he has nothing to worry about. But Ruin didn't buy it. There's no guarantee Ayanokoji won't screw him over if he attacks Class D. With a gun to their head, Class C can't function. So Ruin made his decision. Ruin took his phone, typed something, and slid it across to Ibuki. Ibuki was confused. Ruin declared he'd take responsibility for everything. He'll transfer all his points to Ibuki. Ibuki asked what the hell was he talking about. Ishizaki backed her up. Ruin ignored them. He alone was responsible for this event. Ruin believed his expulsion should suffice. Ayanokoji couldn't believe Ruin was serious. How dumb. Ruin explained a tyrant can only rule as long as he gets results. Now that Ruin has failed, no one will follow him. Ayanokoji did understand Ruin's reasoning. Our boy was impressed. Ruin catches on fast. He understood the lesson Ayanokoji was trying to teach him. Actions have consequences. Ayanokoji believed how Ruin planned was fundamentally wrong, so he wanted to correct him. He wanted Ruin to understand he can't just keep going at someone over and over again, especially if you're a leader. Even if Ruin didn't fear the consequences, that does not mean his followers will be spared. By holding Ishizaki, Ibuki, and Albert hostage, Ayanokoji drove home that point. Ibuki, coming to grips with reality, asked why he's entrusting this to her. Simple, Ruin knew she hated him, so she'll distribute the points evenly. Once Ruin is expelled, his contract with Class A is void. Ishizaki was having a meltdown, but Ruin told him just shut up. Ruin ordered them to handle the rest and left. Before Ruin could leave, Ayanokoji asked if he was serious. Ruin's like, why do you care? Ayanokoji explained that if he leaves now, he'll never know why he lost. He won't grow. Ruin's like, huh? Ayanokoji pressed on. Did Ruin really want to leave without knowing why he lost? Ruin told Ayanokoji to stop. There's no reason for him to help. Ayanokoji gave Ruin a reason. If Dragon Boy sticks around, his life is easier. Ruin can take out both Ichinose and Arisu. Also, his contract with Class A stays in place. Not to mention, if Ruin drops out now, it'll raise suspicions. There were advantages to having Ruin around. Ayanokoji suggested painting a false narrative about what happened here. Ruin agreed. The lie would be Ruin's lackeys got tired of his orders and beat him up. It's also advantageous for Class C to have this narrative. However, Ruin was hell-bent on dropping out. But Ayanokoji still believed there was no reason for him to do so. But if Ruin is so sure, Ayanokoji won't stop him. Ruin's like, good, then don't. Ruin doesn't trust easy. Later that night, Ruin had flashbacks to a field trip. The trip he refers to is the one in his monologue at the start of this volume. It happened in elementary school, and during the trip, they encountered a snake. The other students, even teachers, were mortified, unable to act. However, at this moment, Ruin realized he was different. He felt no fear. The man picked up a rock and bashed the snake's head in, killing it instantly. It's not like he wanted to be a hero, it's that there was no reason to be afraid. That's the day he realized fear and pleasure were two halves of the same coin, and the world is ruled by violence. After that day, his relentless ability to exercise violence brought him victory day in and day out. However, life soon got boring. No one could match him. Ruin truly believed only death would serve him defeat. But tonight, Ruin thought to himself, instead of killing that snake, what if he taught it fear? Would he refrain from taking its life? Ruin was still hung up on why Ayanokoji tried to help him, because it made no sense. Ruin has tasted defeat before, but for some reason today was different. And if you look at the symbolism the author uses here, you can tell why. Snakes are often used as a symbol of change and rebirth. So by bashing the snake's head in, Ruin made a statement. As long as he can wield violence, he never needs to change. But by implicating Ibuki, Albert, and Ishizaki, Ayanokoji taught him a lesson. Violence won't always guarantee victory. With this one defeat, Ayanokoji made Ruin question everything he believed in so far. None of Ruin's defeats beforehand taught him a lesson. Until now. The next day, Ruin made his way to the school. He was dead set on dropping out, but on the way, someone lay in wait. Ibuki. She called out to him, but Ruin ignored her existence. Ibuki panicked and grabbed Ruin's shoulder. Ruin's like, what the hell? Don't touch me so casually. Ibuki's like, it's not like I'm gonna touch you either. She came here to return his phone. Ruin's like, why now? You can return it anytime. Ibuki didn't have an answer. And Ruin wondered what her deal was. She's so adamant when it comes to things that don't matter. Ruin did not take the phone and kept walking. Ibuki stopped him, asking if he's really gonna drop out. Ibuki reminded Ruin of what he taught them on day one. The strongest person is the last one standing. Ruin's like, so? Ibuki asked why was he so down after one loss from Ayanokoji. Ruin admitted he messed up and now has to deal with the consequences. Ruin still couldn't believe Ayanokoji made him feel this way. Ibuki called Ruin out. The way he's acting is lame. Ruin's like, maybe. Ibuki's like, don't maybe me. The girl would not let go of his arm. Ruin asked why she cared. She always wanted him to drop out. Ibuki admitted she did hate him with a passion, but she cooperated because he promised them class A, and this is how he's gonna let it all end? Ruin's like, god damn, this girl does not shut up. Ibuki's just getting started. She let it all out. She put up with Ruin because they had the same goal. Even when class C lost points, no one questioned him because they had faith in Ruin to lead them to class A. But now he's cowering and just wanting to drop out. How pathetic. Ruin put on a front saying he lied to them. He told them what they wanted to hear in order to control them. It was all for his benefit. Ibuki whispered one thing: 800 million points. Ruin's like, what? Ibuki looked through Ruin's phone. He had a plan outlined. It was to secure 800 million private points. You only need 20 million to transfer to class A. Ibuki was skeptical whether or not they could even save up 800 million, but she knew Ruin never planned to leave them behind. Ruin was pissed and snatched the phone away. He said he was just fooling around. However, he did point out it was possible for them to save up that many points, but they couldn't if he was in control. Kaneda and Hiyori would take on leadership. As long as Ayanokoji doesn't butt in, it's still a viable plan. Ruin took a look at his phone and realized Ibuki ignored all his instructions. Not a single point was transferred over. Ibuki, however, resorted to the only plan she had. If he's gonna drop out, he should fight her. Ruin's like, what an idiot. He called her out. She's still recovering from yesterday's beatdown. Her grip was weak. He removed her hand and kept walking. But next thing you know, Ruin was on the pavement. Ibuki vented her frustration and toppled him. She then angrily yelled out, if he wants to drop out, good riddance. That hurt. Ruin still hadn't recovered. Ayanokoji did a number on him. But Ruin still wondered just how long Ibuki was waiting. Arriving at the lounge, Ruin met up with his homeroom teacher, Sakagami-sensei. They needed to talk somewhere private. But before they could go, two other idiots showed up. Ishizaki and Albert, they've been waiting all morning. Sakagami told Ruin they wouldn't leave. Dragon Boy straight up threatened to kill them if they didn't run. Sakagami asked if they had anything to do with the security camera. Ruin was like, nah, that's all me. Ruin knew any carelessness would put them in trouble. Ruin walked towards the council room and Sakagami followed him. Sakagami asked if a fight broke out between Ruin, Ishizaki, and Albert. Ruin was like, yep, he's the aggressor and would take all responsibility. Ishizaki spoke up from a distance saying that's not true. Ruin straight up kicked Ishizaki, tell him to shut the hell up. Sakagami's like, what are you doing? Ruin turned to Sakagami's like, whatever, just add that to my penalty. It didn't matter, Ruin was leaving anyways. Ruin and his homeroom teacher were finally alone. Ruin got down to it, asking to start his withdrawal process. Sakagami was confused. He assumed this was about the dispute between Class C and Class D. Ruin was caught off guard. His mind went to the worst case scenario. Last minute, Ayanokoji went back on his word and reported what happened to the school. Ruin asked if a complaint was filed against them. This confused Sakagami even more. There was no complaint. Class D came forward saying they were also involved in destroying the camera. Ruin could not hide the surprise on his face. What is this situation? Sakagami informed him that Class D would cover the cost of repairs. Also here, I want to clear something up. In part 1, I told you how Ruin lost his class 100 class points, and I tell you why in this part. I thought it was because he was experimenting with the cameras. But right here, Sakagami explains the penalty for that is private points. So that can't be the reason. Talking to longtime readers, I was informed that it's still a mystery to this day how they lost those points. But getting back on topic, Ruin realized Ayanokoji was taking him for a ride. He wanted to stop Ruin from dropping out. However, Ayanokoji would not get his way. Ruin was determined. He told Sakagami to start the process. Sakagami's like, really? Even though there's no issue? Ruin elaborated, there's no reason for him to stay at the school. Sakagami's like, sure, he can't stop him. He got Ruin a withdrawal form, but he got 2 more. The other 2 withdrawal forms were for Ishizaki and Albert. Albert. Ruin's like, why? They have nothing to do with this. Sakagami agreed, but they said if Ruin would drop out, they would drop out as well. God damn Ayanokoji, Ruin knew he put them up to this. Sakagami chimed in, he also wishes for Ruin not to withdraw. Those are his personal feelings. Sakagami told Ruin they can act like nothing happened here. Ruin wondered what the point of any of this was. Ayanokoji should know full well he has no intention of tackling Ichinose or Arisu. That was obvious when he stepped down from leadership. All that talk about Ruin making Ayanokoji's life easier, that did not hold true. So why? Regardless, Ruin could not pull the trigger. He handed the paper back to Sakagami and left. Unknown to Ruin, the events on the rooftop would spark a different alliance within Class C. 2 days after the exam, Ibuki, for a lack of better words, was bored. She looked at her hands and they were beet red. She thought she'd feel better after pummeling Ruin. She'd forget everything and move on. But here she is, back at school, waiting for someone, freezing for God knows what reason. Wanting to forget everything, Ibuki meditated. Maybe her mental was weird from all the recent craziness. That's why she's acting irrationally. But soon, a certain realization dawned on her. However, she won't accept it. She hasn't had a peaceful day since she arrived at the school. She was assigned to Class C and Ruin took control. Normally, a student like Ruin would be alienated, maybe even bullied, but Ruin did not hold back. Even in front of the cameras, Ruin beat Ishizaki silly. Everyone was in shock. However, there's a method to Ruin's madness. He knew they couldn't report him. Punishing him meant punishing the entire class. Ruin continued on testing the rules. Ibuki felt Ruin's schemes brought himself a sense of pride. He truly was having fun, but that's what led to Ruin's eventual downfall. He thought he was invincible, clearly not the case. Ibuki felt Class C let Ruin down. If at any point they could stop him, even just a bit, maybe things would play out differently. Whatever, Ruin deserved it. He's a wicked man. So Ibuki wondered, why is she feeling a sense of anger? Why is she so irritated? She clutched onto her head, telling herself to forget it all. This was a precious winter holiday, she shouldn't be spending it like this. Ibuki watched as students entered Keaki Mall, but that had nothing to do with her. She had no friends. However, she did have a meeting today. The person was late. Ibuki was already waiting for 30 minutes, but the person finally showed up calling out to her. It was Ishizaki followed by Albert. Ibuki complained, but Ishizaki was like, things were rough. But it worked. Ruin won't be leaving. However, Ruin was mad. The fresh injuries on Ishizaki's face proved it. Regardless, Ishizaki looked happy and Ibuki was like, why? Shouldn't Ishizaki want Ruin out? Ishizaki admitted in the beginning he wasn't fond of Ruin, but over time he came to respect him. Ibuki wondered if the constant beatings caused Ishizaki brain damage, because what he said made no sense. In Ibuki's eyes, Ruin is just a loser who got carried away. However, Ibuki felt the same aura from Albert. She asked if Albert felt the same and he nodded. Ibuki didn't get it. Albert could easily overthrow Ruin. To be honest, when Ruin first fought Albert, he lost 3 times in a row. But slowly Ruin wore him down. And before they knew it, Albert was one of Ruin's generals. However, Ishizaki understood Albert. He hates to fight. Ibuki was like, what? Albert's this strong and he hates to fight? He's like a giant muscled teddy bear. Ishizaki asked her, has she ever seen Albert fight without Ruin's orders? Ibuki has not. Ishizaki playfully slapped Albert's back, saying Ruin brought out Albert's manliness. Ibuki's like, whatever, she's going home. However, Ishizaki hit her up with a confusing proposal. He asked if she wanted to grab some tea. Ibuki just stood there going, is this really happening? The idiot Ishizaki was asking her to hang out? Ishizaki picked up on how weird this might sound and explained it's nothing like that. He just wants to talk about Ruin. And besides, Albert is coming too. How weird. Ibuki knew Ishizaki was rude, which is funny coming from her, but the dude was honest to a fault. But why would they want to hang out with her? They've never invited her out before, so why now? Is it because of the events yesterday? Well, whatever. It's not like Ibuki had plans, but she did warn them. If they try anything, she'll beat them up. Ishizaki assured her he absolutely does not see her that way. The harsh rejection still annoyed Ibuki for some reason. They hit up a cafe inside Keaki Mall. Ishizaki was surprised Ibuki wanted to know about Ruin. He was sure she hated him. Ibuki didn't stutter, she did hate him. Then why did she want to know what happened to him? Ibuki had no response. She couldn't express why. Maybe she's mad at Ruin for running away. Not something she'd expect Ishizaki and Albert to understand. So she told him it has nothing to do with them. Ishizaki, reading the mood, did not push further. However, he did bring up the elephant in the room. What's the plan next semester? Ibuki's like, how should she know? Ishizaki brought up a valid point. They need to know. Ibuki felt Ishizaki would still hold out hope that Ruin would change his mind and lead Class C again. So Ibuki was firm, telling him that Ruin isn't coming back. Ibuki knew Ishizaki wanted her to help him convince Ruin. It was a pointless endeavor. Ishizaki brought up the topic of Class D, but Ibuki stopped him right there. She does not want to hear anything about Class D. Before, she just hated Ruin, but after the events of the rooftop, the number of people she hates has increased to 2. Take a wild guess, who do you think the other person is? Out of nowhere, a fresh face approached them, greeting everyone. It was Hiyori. Ibuki was still salty from the mention of Ayanokoji, but Hiyori didn't mind. She noticed the rare combination of people and couldn't help but come over. Ishizaki didn't think it was weird, claiming that they're always together. But Ibuki strongly rejected that claim. She did not want to be grouped up with Ruin's other lackeys. Hiyori asked to join and Ishizaki and Albert were on board. Ibuki knew Hiyori's capabilities. Together with Kaneda, they were the brains of Class C. Ruin relied on them a lot. Hiyori just got back from the tea ceremony club. Now, if she picked up calligraphy, she'd be unstoppable. They talked about club activities for a bit, but soon she steered the conversation towards Ruin. She noticed him in his school uniform and was worried. Ishizaki told her there's nothing to worry about. Ibuki wanted to leave, but Albert gently grabbed her shoulder. The man pointed at her drink, the implication being he'd like her to stay until she finishes it. Ibuki rushed the drink, but it was too hot. Hiyori hit her up with the classic ara ara, saying she shouldn't rush herself. Hiyori knew Ibuki didn't like hot food. Ibuki's like, whatever, Hiyori shouldn't act so familiar with her. Hiyori's like, but we're classmates. Ibuki laughed at that notion. Class C is a ruthless place. Things like being classmates meant nothing. Well, none of that mattered. Starting the new semester, they'd be Class D. Hiyori, however, was optimistic, saying they will rise back up. Hiyori was more than willing to help out. Ibuki always thought Hiyori was weird, but not this weird. The sense of unity she's talking about? Yeah, that didn't exist within Class C. Teamwork was always something they lacked. But they made up for it with Ruin's absolute leadership. Now that he stepped down, things will crumble. Even Hiyori should understand this. However, Hiyori held firm. Even if they're behind, they can work on it. Ibuki wasn't convinced. She won't participate and wished them luck. Ishizaki asked why was Ibuki so irritated. Ibuki almost picked a fight with them. Hiyori commented on Ishizaki's injuries and completely got his name wrong. She called him Iwasaki, and the poor soul corrected her. But Hiyori just laughed. She was joking. She knew his name, but was curious as to how he got those injuries. Ishizaki almost blurted out the reason, but Ibuki stepped in, giving Hiyori that fake story about Ishizaki and Ruin getting into a fight. However, Hiyori commented a disagreement between Ruin and Ishizaki? That is strange. Regardless, Hiyori said she'd talk to Ruin and tell him fighting is bad. Ibuki's like, what can you do? Hiyori confidently said she'll just tell Ruin to stop fighting. Ibuki wondered how Hiyori went on so long without a lashing from Ruin. But then again, she never goes against his orders. Ibuki finished her drink and bid them farewell. But before she could go, Hiyori called out to her, saying there are a lot of interesting movies dropping. They should go watch some together. Ibuki made up a lie saying she's not going, and even if she did, it would be alone. Hiyori's like, oh, that's a pity. Ibuki had enough socializing for one day. She couldn't take it anymore because she finally realized what was bothering her. Why she was so angry, it wasn't anyone's fault. She was angry at herself. If she was reliable, if she was stronger, then Class C wouldn't be in this situation. She couldn't forgive herself for being this weak. Even if Ruin made a mistake, she could have covered for him. And if she stayed any longer, her classmates would serve as a reminder of her incompetency. So she wanted to leave ASAP and wallow in her sorrow. But Ishizaki reached out to her, urging her not to shoulder everything herself. And if she needs, she can come talk to them. Ibuki let out a sarcastic, huh? There's nothing to talk about. Normally, Ishizaki is stupid. Why is he so smart in a situation like this? Ibuki pondered. It looked like the three of them invited Ibuki to cheer her up. They could tell she was hard on herself. Ibuki wondered what this even was. She never hoped for any of it. Embarrassed, she walked far away from that scene. She had no place in a warm environment like this. Initially, she thought today would be boring, but it turned out to be full of events she could not avoid. And little known to Ibuki, soon would come another event she could not escape. A few days after the events, a rumor spread throughout the first year. Ruin no longer led Class C. He became a complete loner and didn't talk to anyone. Ayanokoji couldn't help but compare Ruin to himself. When he first arrived at the school, our boy wondered if Ruin one day would find something that would wake him up. Who knows? But he did know one thing. They were definitely alike, and he could still be of some use. Also, another thing to add here, Ayanokoji is still unsure as to why he helped Ruin. Like we saw earlier, Dragon Boy isn't taking on Ichinose or Arisu. This is actually part of Ayanokoji's personality he himself isn't aware of. The fact that he loves to help people. And we've seen countless examples, Sudo in Volume 1, Sakura in Volume 2, constantly helping Horikita. He talks about Kei's growth and how she can overcome her past. And as the final example, we see him trying to help Ruin, someone who's become a shell of his former self, with really no guarantee of being useful in the future. And trust me, a conversation in the future will make this also apparent. Also guys, huge shout out to both Kale and Wicked for help with the script. Guys, Wicked went above and beyond. He provided huge write-ups of the hidden plots, answered every question I had, and even went as far as to revise the entire script. This is like close to a 2-hour long video. That script was like 50 plus pages. pages. And he didn't ask for anything in return. He just wanted you guys to have more info so you can understand the series. So I'm gonna give him a shout out here. I've linked to a few of his posts down below. If you have the time, go check them out. It's some of the best analysis posts I've seen on Classroom with Elite. And also guys, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, because I truly believe this video, out of any video I've made, has the most power to bring more fans into the series and really show people what Classroom with Elite is about. So I need your help to spread this video far and wide. And I hope you guys have a sweet tooth, because following all these epic events, we're gonna get some sweet, sweet, sweet payoff. See you guys there.